Okay, so for this question, this is a question on circular measures and trigonometry. For this first question, it asks us why does the radius of x has to be lesser than 40? And this is quite simple if you read the first part of the question and understand it. It's because that since these two circles must not be intersecting, and the difference between the center of the circles is 50, if the the radius of the largest circle is greater than 40 or equals to 40, that means that these two circles will then be intersecting. Or else it will not be possible for the center to be 50 away. So the first part will be done as long as you can explain that in words. Now, the second part for this cosine theta is equals to x minus 10 over 50. For this part, you have to start drawing things like triangles and stuff. So for a lot of geometry questions, a way to do them is by drawing simpler shapes such as triangles, rectangles, or like even squares, if possible in a diagram to make it easier for you. So for this one, since we know that this is a tangent of one another, it's 90 degrees. So, and we know that cosine theta is probably connected to like a right angle triangle. So we have to draw a right angle triangle, and very likely it will be this one over here. This line would be parallel and equal to that line over there. They will be equal, they're the same, right? This will be 90 degrees, this will be 90 degrees, and this will also be 90 degrees, right? So from here, since this is a right angle triangle, and this would be x minus 10, yes, because we're going from there to there. So that means that cosine theta would also be adjacent over hypotenuse, which is the same as x minus 10 over 50. Now, for this next part, we're trying to find an expression for mn in terms of x. So mn is this part over here. Now, we already established that this line would be equal to that line. So all we have to do is use some simple trigonometry to find this line over here using Pythagoras. So it should be quite simple. So mn squared would be the same as 50 squared minus x minus 10 squared, which would also becomes, once you roots both sides, you become this. Alright? Now this is the second part of the other question. So since we know that x is the same as, or rather mn, is the same as 50 squared minus x minus 10 squared from the first part. In order for this value to be maximized, well, you can either plot on the GDC or we can use some deduction. So since we know that this part will always be a positive, so that means that it's always minusing a positive number. So in order for this to be the smallest it can be, it has to be greater or equals to 0. So that means that x minus 10 squared is always greater or equals to 0. So to minimize this, to make it equals to 0, that means that x must be equals to 10, which is the value of x that which maximizes mn, as it would be at 50. Now, for the next part, I also think is the most difficult part of the section is to find an expression in terms of x for a and b. And this requires a lot of some parts of inverse trigonometry. So in order for us to do this part, we have to write a and b, which are these two angles, as kind of the radius of the larger circle. So in order to do that, we have to use some sort of theta. So since we know that cos theta is equals to x minus 10 over 50, this also means that the arc of cos theta, this also means that theta is also equals to arc cos x minus 10 over 50, right? So that's the theta part. And since we also know that this is 90 degrees, this is 90 degrees, and obviously since these two lines are parallel, these two lines has to be parallel as well, meaning that this theta is equals to p, which means that this is also equal to theta, right? So all of the angles are equal. And since we know that, we also know that since these two are parallel to one another, if we draw this line continuously, then that means that this theta must be equal to this theta. So this is equal to theta, this is equals to theta. So we also know that b is also equal to 2 theta. That means that writing in terms of that, we'll get b is equal to 2 arc cos x minus 10 over 15. Now, writing it in terms of a, we just have to minus it by 2 pi minusing away the thetas. So we will get a is equals to 2 pi minus the 2 thetas, which will also be 2 pi minus 2 arc cos x minus 10 over 15. And that's the two angles, and the answer is right there.